Well, great book students, here is our first book together. I'm really excited to share with you one of my favorite books. It's been one of my favorite books most of my life. Up here above, I have my mother. My mother introduced me to reading. So many wonderful stories I could tell about how she opened my eyes to the wonder of books. She was an English teacher, Box Elder High School for many years, but she was my greatest teacher. And she taught me how to love books because as a little boy, she held me on her lap and read me stories, or she let me sit under the ironing board while she ironed and told me stories. But either way, she filled my soul with the excitement of stories. We used to live in Anchorage, Alaska. This bear is going to come into play in just a minute, you see, because I also grew up in bear country, completely surrounded by bears, and our neighbors often hunted bears. My dad had shot a bear and wore a bearskin coat when he went out on a cold winter's night. And my interest in bears was great because we had to pick berries all the time to feed our family. Uh, my mother and dad were both into canning fruit of all kinds, and we had to can the berries. And so we used to wear a little tin can full of gravel around our ankles so that we'd scare the bears off. We'd always go out and play and everything. So my life was full of bears, and my mother introduced me to this wonderful book by Lynd Ward called The Biggest Bear. Now, this was my copy that was over to the high school, and in this slow closure or soft closure, I didn't have it home, and I wanted to get one, so I thought I'll go buy another one. And I went to the bookstore, and they didn't have it. Can you believe that? But anyway, by Lynd Ward, is born in 1905. He died 80 years later in 1985. He was an adult novelist. He wrote 6 great adult novels. He also wrote graphic novels, which were wonderful graphic novels in that they didn't have any words in them. They were just these beautiful woodcuts that he made to tell the story. He was an illustrator. He wrote his books in order to show his illustrations. And for a long time, he was the president of the Society of American Graphic Artists, which I think is very pretty. A graphic artist means the artists who make pictures. That's right. But his most famous book, most popular book, and his award-winning, it won the Caldecott Award, which is a award for children's books, is The Biggest Bear. Now, one of the reasons it might not be available at the bookstore today is it's not always politically correct to catch bears, let alone kill them or stuff them or mount them on carpets and to rugs, but it was surely a big part of my life when I was a kid, as was carrying a gun. And we started out when I was a kid with BB guns, and we shot everything that moved and flew. And then by the time I was much younger than any of you, I was toting a 22 wherever most I went out in the woods. Of course, in Alaska, we lived 6 miles from town in the middle of the forest. There were plenty of fun things to shoot. And not long after that, when we moved to Utah, I became an avid hunter, both of big game up in the mountains, but especially I was a bird hunter, ducks and geese. And I used to drive my dad's pickup to the high school with my shotgun up in the back window. And as soon as I got out of school, boy, as the bell rang, I was on my way out to jump into that pickup and head out to the nearest swamp and hunt ducks till, well, as late as I could get away with it. So hunting was an important part of my life, and I think that this wonderful book that my mom introduced me to helped me teach me that, though my dad and mom were both big into hunting too. But as that little bit of an introduction to me, let me share with you this beautiful book, kind of fun, called The Biggest Bear. Okay, here we go. Johnny Orchard lived on a farm farthest up the valley and closest to the woods. Isn't he a handsome little guy toting his gun? Of course, he lived up closest to the woods. Why wouldn't he? We lived right close to the woods too. On the hillside behind the barn, Johnny's grandfather had planted a few apple trees. Can you see them up here? A few apple trees. They were the only apple trees in the valley, and they were known as orchards. Orchard. Okay. There's Johnny walking down the street, okay, in his little town. It was a dirt street. And the village I grew up in as a little boy had dirt streets. Nunaka Valley, 6 miles out of Anchorage. And all the streets were dirt, and I thought that was exciting. Okay, whenever Johnny went down the road to the store for a piece of maple sugar, of course, I always loved maple sugar when I was a kid because Johnny did. He was my hero. Or sometimes, or something, he always felt humiliated. The other barns in the valley usually had bear skins nailed up to dry, but never Johnny's barn. There's a bear skin on that barn, and a bear skin on that barn, and a bear skin on that barn, but no bear skins on the orchard's barn. Every fall for 3 years, Mr. McLean had come in with a bear. Look at that man carrying a dead bear on his back. That's the type of man you want to be, okay? You want to deal with bears. Of course, up at Camp Lowell, where I spend my summers, we got way too many bears, okay? So I'm delighted to hear they're being removed from the endangered species list, and we'll be getting rid of a few of them, I hope, soon. But you can disagree with me. It's all right. It's so fun. And one evening, Mr. Pennell had just stepped out to the edge of his nearest field and shot 3 in a row as they came heading for the tall timber. No doubt a mom and her 2 cubs. Go, Mr. Pennell, thinks Johnny. Oh. It is true that Johnny's grandfather had met a bear once when he was on his way back from picking apples, but he had gone in one direction while the bear had gone in another. And when Johnny asked him why, his grandfather had said, "Better a bear in the orchard than an orchard in the bear." It was very humiliating. Remember, that's their family name is Orchard. So his name is Johnny Orchard, Grandpa Orchard. Okay, here he goes on his great adventure. All right, there he goes off into the woods. Johnny said, "If ever I see a bear, I'll shoot him so fast he won't know what hit him. And we'll have the biggest bear skin in the whole valley." So off he goes on his adventure. After he had gone quite a way into the woods, and I remember going out in the woods by myself, not a good idea in bear country, or in any country actually, he came to a place where there was a big stump, and something seemed to be moving in the bushes behind it. Ooh. It was a bear, all right. Wait a minute, look at that. Tiny, cute bear. Touched your heart, doesn't it? He seemed hungry. So Johnny gave him a piece of maple sugar. How generous can you get? Go, Johnny. On the way home, the bear ate all the maple sugar Johnny had in his pockets. That's quite a bear. And he's well taken care of. Look at, they're like hugging each other. Johnny's taking good care of his bear. Johnny's mother and father were a little surprised to see that Johnny had really brought a bear back with him. Johnny's grandfather said, "Whoomp." Okay, there's his mom and dad, a little fruffled. And his grandfather says, "Whoomp. I suppose you know what bears like to eat." The bear liked the milk that was meant for the calves. There he is drinking the milk right out of the bucket. He liked the mash meant for the chickens. Go, chickens, go. Here comes the little bear. And of course, he liked the apples in the orchard. But most of all, he especially liked the maple sugar Johnny brought him from the store. Aren't they becoming best friends? Can you see that? Quite the pet, I would say. Uh-oh, trouble's brewing. In the fall, Mr. McCarroll got plenty upset when the bear spent the night in his cornfield. Looks like somebody's been eating all the corn. Crunch, 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 crunch. There was hardly anything he didn't like, and Johnny's mother got plenty upset when he started looking for things to eat on the kitchen shelves. That's going to cause trouble. Look at that old wood stove right there. This house I live in had a wood stove, both for heating and for cooking. When it was built in 1918, in the winter, he had a wonderful time with the bacons and hams in the Pennell's smokehouse. I wonder if they've been smoking any of those bears. Bears taste a lot like pork. I've eaten parts of several of them. Even recently, 2 Thanksgivings ago, I made bear roast. I'm a bear one of my camp staff members was able to shoot during bear season with a license, of course. About 4 miles from Camp Lowell. Was a great deliverance to us. It was bad enough when he emptied all the sap buckets when the McCanns were tapping their maple trees in the spring. Okay, you just put a little hole in the tree and the sap runs out. That's how you start on your way to maple sugar, but watch what happens. But it was worse later. Boy, that looks pretty scary. When he got into the McCanns' shed and drank up most of their maple syrup, he was always eating, and it seemed, and he grew pretty fast and got pretty big. Whoa, just a year old. Whoa, big, big bear. 2 years, I guess. Finally, Mr. McCanns started talking to Mr. Pennell, and they both went to see Mr. McCarroll, and then they all came to see Johnny and his father. There you go, talking to Johnny's father about that. They're getting ready to go and talk. After, look at that strong little man talking to his dad. After the neighbors had left, Johnny's father explained to Johnny that the bear would have to go back to the woods. Can't have him living around the neighborhood. So here we go on our adventure. Can you see little Johnny with his great big bear headed off into the forest? So the next morning, Johnny started out. They walked for miles due west on an old lumber road way past Baldwin's Hill to an old clearing that was overgrown with raspberries. Yep, I'm picking raspberries. I got a can full of rattling rocks on my ankles because I know there's a bear somewhere. Johnny explained to the bear that it was time that he had come for him to go back and live in the woods like other bears. He gave the bear a last hug and started the long walk home. Sending your friend off to live all alone in the woods. I hope he can make it. Uh-oh. While he was doing his chores, I hope you do plenty of chores around your house, okay? While Johnny was doing his chores, next morning, he saw the bear hadn't stayed in the woods very long. There he is, right by the barn. I'll come back. Looking for chicken feed, no doubt. So Johnny started out again. Due east this time that's the opposite direction, to the Blueberry Bluff, way past Watson's Hill. And when Johnny left him, the bear was eating blueberries very happily. Yeah, bears love blueberries. They're almost as good as huckleberries. Huh? But in 2 days, what's that bear getting ready to eat? Either pig slop or pigs. Yep, there he is. But 2 days later, he was back again. You see a pattern developing here. On to the west, gone to the east. Uh-oh. This time he's getting serious. This time, Johnny took him due south and got a boat. Can you imagine a little boy like that rowing a bear out in a boat? That's the man I wanted to be when I was his age, I'll tell you. And still do. Whoa. Got a boat and rowed 2 miles out in the lake and left him on Gull's Island, which is a pretty big island. Nice place for a bear to live. But next morning, there he was, not even very wet. Here it comes. You knew it would. Johnny and his father talked it over, and they decided there was only one thing to do. Johnny said he would do it. He's got his gun, got his rifle. He's going to deal with his bear. They didn't really have to go very far. No. But Johnny somehow kept on walking. They went north this time. There was no road here. It was part of the woods where Johnny had never been before. It looks rather wild and vicious, doesn't it? Like a windstorm maybe has gone through there. At last they stopped. Johnny seemed to have a hard time getting a bullet in his gun. While he was working with it, the bear seemed to get a whiff of something. Never just walk around with a gun with a bullet in it, you know, you gotta be safe. Without warning, he took off through the woods. Johnny went with him. He's holding on to the rope around his neck. He's not letting go. He had to let go of his rifle, but he's not going to let go of his bear. They went through the woods so fast that Johnny lost his gun, but he held on to the rope. They seemed to be headed for a sort of little log house. Can you see it there? Now, if any of you have ever seen a modern bear trap, we trap lots of bears up at Camp Lull over the years I've been there. They're made out of big round sections of culvert, but the door works the same, okay, as the drop-down door on this trap. They went through the door pretty fast, and something came down with a bang. And they were prisoners. Boy, that bear barely fit in that trap. When Johnny looked around, he saw the bear was happily chewing on a big lump of, maple sugar that had been put into the trap for bait. I find that rotten sausage works pretty well too, actually. Pretty soon, some men came, and they were a little surprised to see Johnny in there. Woo-hoo! Bears are supposed to eat people, aren't they? They explained that they were getting animals for a zoo in the city. You know, when I was even in college, in the heart of Logan, there's a park called Willow Park, and they had some big cages there, just big open cages practically, and they had animals in them. They had bears in a couple of them, It was so much fun to walk down to Willow Park and look at the bears and other animals that were in there. They were so close and handy and well fed and taken care of and didn't seem mad at all. But, oh well, people's opinions changed, I suppose. Anyway, they were getting animals for the zoo in the city. They were delighted with Johnny's bear. He was much bigger than they had ever hoped for. He will have a fine place to live and all he wants to eat. You see him looking out there at his little buddy Johnny? Oh, well, it's better than being shot, the men told Johnny. And you can come and see him whenever you want to. And I'll always bring him maple sugar, said Johnny. Can you see how happy his bear is to see him? Yeah, isn't that great? Now you say, well, that's kind of a weird book, but I'll tell you, it changed my life. Wanted to be Johnny, wanted to spend my time in the woods, and it taught me, I think, the idea that there's nothing you can't do if you put your mind and heart to it. And I hope you all got a little inspiration along that line too. So there's our first book together. No test this time, just a little taste of what books can do to little kids to change their lives. And then we're going to talk about lots and lots of books that do the same. Thank you very much. Goodbye.